How can companies in general, the private sector, be incentivized to do more of it, especially when it comes to the most vulnerable, and those are, of course, least developed countries?
Yeah, I don't think corporate social responsibility is going to solve the problem. It's too small, and it's a good start, and it gets companies thinking about these issues. The example of my own company, which has really invested, I think, over $500 million in education programs of one kind or another, that has been driven not really fundamentally by corporate social responsibility, but by kind of mutual self-interest. We had a blockage because of lack of engineering skills and networking skills in many countries. That it was in our own interests to try and accelerate education, to get it to poor areas, to get it to women who have traditionally not come into our profession in any numbers at all. And it was really so it was a partnership with the government and with the not-for-profit organisations in these various communities that allowed us to unlock an acceleration of education in this area. And I think that is, to answer your question specifically, you need to go way beyond the corporate social responsibility feelings of a company and of the private sector, and engage them much more wholeheartedly in employment creation, in company formation, and in the education that surrounds and builds a platform under those things. Every country needs it. From the rich to the poor, every country has got an issue with unemployment and particularly with unemployed youth, the kind of twin programs of education, of professional education, of continuing education on the one hand, and of creating environments in which you can do company formation is the secret to unlocking this. And companies understand this stuff. So, I think governments can be. The dialogue's really opened up a lot. There's been a big improvement. I think of UN meetings I was attending 10 years ago, there were no companies there at all. And you had this bizarre spectacle of people sitting around talking about development. And you had donor nations and recipient nations and donor NGOs and recipient NGOs, and they're all sitting around saying, how can we encourage more economic growth? Why is sub-Saharan Africa still struggling, and so on and so forth. And there were no companies there at all. And companies are the people who actually know quite a bit, actually, about where economic growth comes from.
Absolutely. And then a follow-up to that. Tell me, I would love to understand from you your perspective on this sort of shift in these emerging economies, right? Sort of a balance of power, if you will, or whatever the terminology is that we're beginning to use. But there is indeed a shift from, let's say, the Western going into the Southern states, the Southern entities, countries. How will this impact those developing countries in terms of their education in working with the private sector?
Well, there's a couple of shifts going on there that I think you may be referring to, or in addition to the one that you're referring to. There is, a general recognition of the failure of top-down, centralized, paternalistic systems. And that applies to development as well. And we've wasted a huge amount of money on, top-down, centrally administered, paternalistic development programs. So I think my company is fascinated with and has participated in this kind of development of a distributed networked world. What happens in this world is that the edge becomes more powerful, as it were. People connect with each other in ever-changing combinations. I'll try to stop hitting your microphone. And solve problems themselves. So you start to see all sorts of interesting alliances forming that are really outside or go beyond traditional educational institutions and traditional aid institutions and all these sorts of things. So that kind of shift, I think, is revolutionary. And in fact, it's in many countries at the moment literally revolutionary. When you see what's happening, particularly in some of the traditionally autocratic countries who we may have mistakenly assumed for some reason didn't want democratization. That appears to be wrong. All people appear to need democracy. All people appear to need empowerment. And when you start to put tools into people's hands, particularly communication tools, that allow them to connect with each other, they become immensely powerful.